I pushed the plate away. My stomach had stopped asking for food weeks ago. "Mom, you're not eating again?" David didn't look up from his phone. His voice carried that edge I'd learned to recognize, the one that came before consequences. "I'm just not hungry, sweetheart." He finally looked at me. "You know what the doctor said about your sugar levels?" I nodded. The kitchen felt smaller every day, even though nothing had changed except me. Outside, Mrs. Chen's wind chimes sang in the October breeze, a sound that used to make me smile. Now it just reminded me that there was a world out there I couldn't reach anymore. "I'll eat later," I whispered. David stood up and I flinched. Just slightly. Just enough that I hated myself for it. He walked to the fridge and opened it. For a long moment he just stared inside. Then he screamed, a sound so raw and desperate that it rattled the glasses in the cabinet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I ended up here. In my own home, afraid of my own son. If you're new to this channel, welcome. We're just starting out, sharing stories about real people facing impossible moments. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more. We'll be here every day with something new. Now, let me take you back to where this really began. My husband Thomas died on a Tuesday. They say you never forget the day, and they're right. It was raining. That soft, apologetic Seattle rain that feels more like mist than water. I remember thinking how fitting it was, how Thomas would have appreciated the subtlety of it. He was a subtle man, quiet, kind in ways that didn't announce themselves. The funeral was small. Thomas had wanted it that way. No fuss, he'd told me years ago, when we were both healthy and death seemed like something that happened to other people, just the people who matter. So it was me, David, a handful of friends from the neighborhood, and Thomas's brother who flew in from Denver and left the same day. We stood under black umbrellas while the minister said words I didn't hear. I kept thinking Thomas would have hated this, the formality, the performance of grief. He would have wanted us at home, drinking coffee, remembering the good parts. After everyone left, I sat in our living room, my living room now, and felt the silence press against me like a physical thing. 42 years of marriage, and suddenly, I was alone. The house still smelled like him. His coffee mug was still in the sink. His reading glasses were on the side table, folded neatly, waiting for eyes that would never use them again. I didn't know how to be a widow. I didn't know how to be just Rachel, without Thomas beside me. What I didn't know, what he'd never told me, was that he'd put everything in my name 3 years before he died. The house, his pension, the savings account we'd built over 42 years of marriage. All of it, legally mine. I found out from the lawyer 2 weeks after the funeral. I sat in that oak-paneled office, confused, while Mr. Harrison explained that Thomas had been very specific, very intentional. "He wanted you protected, Rachel," Mr. Harrison had said, sliding papers across his desk. He made sure of that. The documents were thick, official, covered in language I didn't fully understand. But the essence was clear. Thomas had transferred everything to me. Sole ownership. Sole control. "Why didn't he tell me?" I'd asked. Mr. Harrison had paused, choosing his words carefully. "He said he wanted you to find out after. He said you'd understand when the time came." I'd nodded, not understanding. Protected from what? Thomas and I had been partners. We'd shared everything. What threat had he seen that I'd missed? I understood now. David showed up the day after I met with the lawyer. He'd been living in Portland, doing something with tech startups that never quite worked out. He was 38, and still trying to find himself, as he liked to say. Thomas used to joke that David would find himself right around retirement age, but there was no humor in Thomas's voice when he said it, just this quiet resignation, like he'd accepted long ago that our son wasn't going to be what we'd hoped. "Mom, I'm so worried about you," David had said, standing on my doorstep with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, all alone in this big house. "Let me stay for a while, help you figure things out." His hair was longer than I remembered, pulled back in a ponytail. He'd gained weight around his middle. He looked tired. Not the tired of hard work, but the tired of disappointment, of dreams that kept failing. I'd been so grateful, so relieved. The house had felt enormous and silent since Thomas left, every room echoing with absence. Having David there seemed like an answer to prayers I'd been too proud to say out loud. "Just until you get back on your feet," I'd said, hugging him tight. He'd hugged me back, and over his shoulder, I'd seen him looking at the house. Really looking. The way you look at something you're measuring. The way you look at something you're planning to own. The first month was almost nice. David cooked dinner. Nothing fancy. Mostly pasta and jarred sauce. But it was hot in there, and I didn't have to eat alone. He drove me to doctor's appointments, waiting in the car while I saw Dr. Patterson about my blood pressure, my cholesterol, the routine maintenance of a 67-year-old body. He even fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom that Thomas had been meaning to get to for years. I'd stood in the doorway watching him work, and for a moment, I'd felt hopeful. Maybe this was it. Maybe losing his father had finally made David grow up. "There," he'd said, tightening the last connection. "Good as new. Thank you, sweetheart. That's what I'm here for, Mom. To take care of you." I started to think maybe grief had changed him, matured him the way nothing else had. Maybe Thomas's death had been the wake-up call David needed. Then he brought out the papers. "It's just a power of attorney, Mom. Standard stuff." David had spread the documents across the kitchen table, the same table where Thomas and I had eaten breakfast for 4 decades, the same table where we'd helped David with homework, where we'd played cards on Sunday nights, where we'd shared 10,000 ordinary moments that added up to a life. "You're getting older. What if something happens? What if you fall? Or forget to pay a bill? What if you have a medical emergency and can't make decisions? I'm 67, David. Not 90. Dad just died, Mom. The stress alone. You're not thinking clearly. I've been reading about this. Grief affects cognitive function. You might not even realize you're making mistakes." I looked at the papers. They were dense with legal language, clause after clause of authorization and permissions. My eyes couldn't focus on the words. "I don't know," I'd started. "Do you trust me?" He'd taken my hand then, and his eyes had been so earnest, so worried, so much like the little boy who used to climb into my lap after nightmares, who used to hold my hand crossing the street. "I'm your son. I love you. I just want to make sure you're taken care of. That's all Dad would have wanted, for someone to look after you." He was right about that. Thomas would have wanted me taken care of. Thomas had spent his whole life taking care of me, not because I was helpless, but because that's what partners do. They watch out for each other. And David was my son. My baby. The child I'd carried and birthed and loved with a fierceness that had surprised me. Surely I could trust him. Surely blood meant something. I signed. God help me, I signed. David watched my pen move across the paper, and I swear I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not relief, not love, something else. Something that should have warned me. But I was grieving. I was tired. I was lonely. And I wanted to believe that my son was good. Within a week, David had consolidated all my accounts into one bank. "Easier to manage," he'd explained, showing me a neat spreadsheet he'd created. "See? Everything in one place. Simple." He'd changed all the passwords. "For security. You wouldn't believe how many elderly people get scammed online, Mom. I'm just protecting you." He'd gotten himself added to the deed as a co-owner, just in case something happens to you. This way the house doesn't get tied up in probate. It's smart planning. Every change came with an explanation. Every explanation sounded reasonable. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, my life stopped being mine. First, it was small things. He'd remind me not to call my friends too late, not to bother them. "Vonda's busy, Mom. She has her own life. She doesn't need you calling her every day." "I don't call her every day. You called her 3 times this week. That's a lot, Mom. You need to give people space." I hadn't thought 3 calls in a week was excessive. Vonda and I had talked almost daily for 20 years. But David made it sound desperate, needy, so I stopped calling as much. Then he'd suggest I skip my book club. "You're tired. You should rest. Besides, it's getting dark earlier now. I don't like you driving at night. The book club is at 2 in the afternoon. Still, you seem worn out. Maybe take a month off. They'll understand." 1 month became 2, then 3. Then they stopped calling to ask when I was coming back. The weekly dinners with the neighbors stopped. David said it was too much work for me, that I shouldn't feel obligated to entertain. The volunteer work at the library ended. He said I needed to focus on my health, not run around doing favors for other people. Even my morning walks to the corner store. David said the sidewalks were too uneven, too dangerous. What if you fall? What if you break a hip? At your age, that's basically a death sentence. I'm not that old, David. You're not young, Mom. Let's be realistic. So I stopped walking, stopped driving, stopped calling, stopped going. And with each thing I gave up, I felt myself getting smaller, quieter, less. "I'm just worried about you," he'd say. always worried, always protecting, always making sure I understood that the world outside was dangerous, and he was the only one keeping me safe. The worst part wasn't the isolation, though that was bad enough. The worst part was the money. My money. Thomas's pension came in every month, $2,300 deposited on the first, like clockwork. I never saw a penny of it. David paid for groceries, the cheapest brands, never quite enough. Store-brand cereal that tasted like cardboard, thin cuts of meat that were more gristle than protein, vegetables that were always just slightly past fresh. He paid the utilities. He paid the property tax. And he gave me a $20 bill every 2 weeks like I was a child getting an allowance. "What do you need money for?" he'd asked once when I'd requested more. "You don't go anywhere. You don't do anything. I buy everything you need. I'd like to get my hair done. I can cut your hair. I'd like to buy a book. There are books here. Read one of those. I'd like to feel like a person with autonomy, David." He'd looked at me then. Really looked. And I'd seen it. The contempt. The irritation. Like I was this inconvenient obligation he had to manage. "Where's the rest of the money?" I'd asked. My voice barely above a whisper. "Bills, Mom. The house is expensive. The property tax alone is killing us. The insurance. The utilities. The repairs. You have no idea how much things cost now. Inflation is crazy. But I'd been paying those bills for 42 years. I knew exactly what they cost. And even with inflation, they didn't add up to $2,300 a month. Not even close. I started noticing things, finding things. Shopping bags in David's room from stores I couldn't afford. REI, Nordstrom, Williams-Sonoma. New clothes. Designer jeans, expensive sneakers. Noise-canceling headphones that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. A leather jacket hanging in his closet that still had the price tag attached. $600. One day when he was out, I searched his room. I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate, and something was wrong, and I needed to know. I found a lease agreement for an apartment across town, downtown, one of those new buildings with a doorman and a gym, $1,500 a month, furniture receipts from West Elm, CB2, design within reach, a 60-inch television, a sound system, a platform bed that cost more than my first car, all bought with my pension, my savings. The money Thomas had spent 42 years earning, saving carefully for our retirement, for the quiet life we'd planned together. David was using it to furnish his secret apartment, his backup plan, the life he was building while pretending to take care of me. When I confronted him, his face changed. It was like watching a mask slip, revealing something ugly underneath. "You went through my things?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You invaded my privacy? You're stealing from me, David." "Stealing? I'm keeping you alive. I'm keeping this house running. Do you think any of this is free? Do you think I'm here because I want to be?" The words hit me like slaps, each one landing, leaving marks. "You think you're smart?" He stepped closer, and I stepped back. "You think you understand anything? That money is keeping this house running. It's keeping you fed. It's keeping you safe. Or would you rather I left? Would you rather be alone? Because I can leave, Mom. I can walk out that door right now, and then what? You can't manage on your own. You can barely remember to take your medication. I remember fine. Do you? Because I'm the one who fills your pill organizer every week. I'm the one who makes sure you eat. I'm the one who's given up my life to babysit an old woman who doesn't even appreciate it. Old woman. He'd called me an old woman. My son. My baby. I'd stepped back, and he'd seen my fear. I watched him register it, file it away as something useful, as leverage. After that, I stopped asking questions. I stopped looking for receipts. I stopped wondering where the money went. Because the alternative, confronting him again, risking his anger, risking him leaving me alone, felt worse than just accepting it. That's what abuse does. It makes you complicit. It makes you choose your cage because the world outside seems more frightening than the prison you know. The humiliation came in layers, each one building on the last until I couldn't remember what it felt like to have dignity. David started making comments about my appearance. "Maybe don't wear that dress, Mom. It's a bit tight. You've gained weight." I hadn't gained weight. I'd lost 15 pounds, but I stopped wearing the dress. "Your hair looks messy. Did you even brush it?" I had brushed it, but I brushed it again. My cooking. "This is kind of bland, don't you think? Dad used to say your cooking was amazing, but I don't know, Mom. This just tastes like nothing. Thomas had loved my cooking. He'd told me so 1,000 times. But David made me doubt even that memory. My intelligence. You're confused again. I already explained this. Are you sure you're okay? Should I make an appointment with Dr. Patterson? Maybe get you checked for dementia? I wasn't confused. I remembered what he'd said. But he'd gaslight me so consistently that I started questioning my own mind. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe I was losing it. He'd interrupt me when I spoke, correct me in front of the mailman, the grocery store clerk, anyone who might have been a witness to my still being a real person. Actually, Mom, that's not what happened. You're remembering it wrong. No, Mom, we can't afford that. I already told you. Mom, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. He'd sigh, this long, suffering sigh, whenever I asked for anything. A new bottle of shampoo because mine was empty. Stamps because I wanted to write a letter to my sister in Arizona. $5 for the collection plate at church. Do you know how expensive you are? He'd asked once, standing in the kitchen with his arms crossed. Do you have any idea how much it costs to keep you alive? I'd felt myself shrinking, actually physically shrinking, my spine curving, my shoulders folding in, like if I made myself small enough, maybe I'd cost less. Maybe I'd be less of a burden. I stopped looking in mirrors, stopped bothering with makeup or jewelry, stopped styling my hair. What was the point? I was just this expensive, inconvenient thing taking up space in my own home. A burden. A problem. A woman past her usefulness. The worst moments were when he'd be kind, when he'd make dinner and plate it nicely, and for a second, I'd feel that surge of hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today he'd remember he loved me, but the kindness was always a setup for something else, a prelude to asking for more money, or criticizing something I'd done, or reminding me how much I depended on him. See, Mom? I take care of you. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm the only one who stayed. At night, I'd lie in bed and think about Thomas, about the life we'd had, the partnership we'd built. We'd been equals. We'd made decisions together. He'd valued my opinion, respected my intelligence, loved me in ways that made me feel expansive, not small. And now I was this, trapped, diminished, afraid. I thought about the papers Mr. Harrison had given me, the ones I'd hidden in my underwear drawer before David had taken over. He wanted you protected, Rachel. But I wasn't protected. I was a prisoner, and Thomas was gone, and I was alone, and I didn't know how to save myself. One Tuesday, 6 months after David had moved in, Vanda showed up at the door. I heard her voice downstairs, sharp and insistent. I haven't seen Rachel in months, David. I want to see her now. She's resting. She's not feeling well. I don't want to disturb her. Then I'll be quiet. Get out of my way. Vanda, I really don't think... I wasn't asking permission. Move. I heard footsteps on the stairs, quick and determined. And then Vanda was there, in my bedroom. And the look on her face when she saw me made me realize how far I'd fallen. I was sitting in the armchair by the window, wearing the same nightgown I'd had on for 3 days. My hair was unwashed. The room smelled stale. I'd lost more weight. I could see my collarbone jutting out sharply, my wrists looking fragile and bird-like. Rachel, Vanda's voice cracked. She crossed the room in 3 steps. My God, honey, what's happening here? I started to cry. Not the dignified, quiet tears I'd perfected over the past months, but ugly, desperate sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. The kind of crying that makes your whole body shake. That sounds like an animal in pain. Vanda held me. This tiny 72-year-old woman wrapped her arms around me and held on while I fell apart. I can't, I gasped. I can't get out. He has everything. I signed everything away. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid, Vanda. No. Her voice was fierce. No, Rachel, you're not stupid. You're being abused. The word shocked me. Abused. That happened to other people, to women in different circumstances, not to educated, middle-class widows in nice neighborhoods. He's my son. I don't care if he's the Pope. What he's doing is abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, and it ends today. I can't fight him. I don't have access to anything. Then we get you access. Legal isn't the same as right, and what he's doing isn't legal anyway. There are laws, Rachel. Protections. And we're going to use every single one. Come on. She pulled me up, gentle but firm. Get dressed. We're leaving. Where? To see someone who can help. Trust me. David appeared in the doorway then. What's going on? We're going out, Vonda said, not looking at him. Mom's not feeling well. Your mother is fine. And even if she weren't, she's a grown woman who can make her own decisions. I'm her caregiver. I'm responsible. You're her warden. And that ends now. Vonda helped me dress, picked out clothes from my closet, handed me shoes. David stood there watching, his face cycling through expressions: surprise, anger, calculation. Mom, you don't have to go anywhere. Tell her you want to stay here. I looked at him, at my son, the baby I'd nursed and rocked and loved with every cell in my body. And I saw him for what he'd become. Not a monster, nothing so dramatic. Just a small, selfish man who'd decided his comfort mattered more than my dignity. I'm going, David. His jaw tightened. We'll talk about this when you get home. Yes, I said quietly. We will. The lawyer's name was Sarah Kim, and she looked about 25, but had eyes that had seen everything. Her office was small but organized. Certificates on the walls, a photo of 2 kids on her desk. She offered us water, waited until we were settled, then looked at me with complete focus. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about the power of attorney, about the accounts, about the isolation and the money, and the apartment David was furnishing with my pension. I told her about being afraid in my own home, about feeling like I was disappearing. Vonda sat next to me, holding my hand, occasionally adding details I'd forgotten or minimized. When I finished, Sarah's expression hadn't changed. Not shock, not disgust, just professional focus, and something else. Anger. Controlled, directed anger on my behalf. Power of attorney can be revoked, she said. And what he's done, taking your money without your knowledge or consent, isolating you from support systems, manipulating you through fear and guilt, that's financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's a crime, Mrs. Morrison. A serious one. But I signed the papers. Under duress. Under manipulation. You were recently widowed. You were grieving. You were vulnerable, and he exploited that vulnerability. That's not consent. That's coercion. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Listen to me carefully. This is not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong by trusting your son. He's the one who violated that trust. He's the one who committed crimes. And we can fix this. How? We revoke the power of attorney. We close the accounts he has access to and open new ones. We freeze the joint account so he can't withdraw anything more. We file a report with Adult Protective Services. And if he's stolen enough, which it sounds like he has, we can pursue criminal charges. He's my son. I know. And that makes this harder. But he's also your abuser. Those 2 things can be true at the same time. I sat there, letting that sink in. My son was my abuser. The baby I'd carried was the man who'd caged me. What do? I whispered. You take your life back, Sarah said simply. 1 legal document at a time. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of gathering evidence, of Vonda sneaking me out to banks and lawyers' offices, while David was out running errands with my money. 3 weeks of Sarah filing paperwork, revoking the power of attorney, freezing accounts, documenting everything. I got access to my bank statements, the real ones, not the fake summaries David had been showing me. In 6 months, he'd spent $42,000 of my money. $42,000 on furniture, electronics, clothes, restaurants, and $1,500 a month in rent for an apartment I'd never seen. Thomas and I had saved that money over decades. We'd been careful, frugal. We'd skipped vacations, driven old cars, bought generic brands so we'd have security in our retirement. And David had burned through it like it was nothing, like it was his right. Sarah also helped me find something I didn't know existed, a small business loan Thomas had co-signed for David 7 years ago. David had never paid it back. Thomas had been covering the payments silently, never telling me, never wanting to admit that our son had failed again. The loan had been for $20,000. Thomas had paid back 18 of it before he died. David owed me the rest, plus the 42 he'd stolen. And according to Sarah, I had a legal right to pursue it. 3 weeks of also finding my voice again, word by terrifying word. No, I don't consent to that. No, that's not acceptable. No, I deserve better. Vonda came with me to every appointment. She'd sit in waiting rooms with crossword puzzles, drive me home, make me tea, remind me I was doing the right thing. She was 72 and had survived her own battles, an abusive marriage she'd left 20 years ago, a bankruptcy. a cancer scare. She knew what it meant to fight when you're tired. "You're stronger than you think," she'd say. "You just forgot for a while, but we're going to help you remember." On the third Tuesday, Sarah called me at Vonda's house where I'd been staying. "Everything's in place," she said. "The power of attorney is revoked. The accounts are frozen. I've filed the report with APS, and I have a locksmith who can change your locks tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" "Unless you want to wait. But my recommendation is to do this quickly. Once he realizes what's happening, he'll fight back." I thought about it. About David coming home to find the locks changed, his access cut off, his scheme exposed. Part of me wanted to have a conversation first, to explain, to give him a chance to apologize, to somehow make this okay. But I knew better. Abusers don't respond to reason. They respond to power. And the only power I had was the power to say no. To say enough. To say you don't get to do this anymore. "Tomorrow," I said. "Change the locks tomorrow." We changed them on a Wednesday. Sarah had advised me to do it when David was out, and Vonda had paid for the locksmith with her own money. Money I swore I'd pay back, though she waved me off like it was nothing. The locksmith was efficient. New deadbolts, new doorknobs, new keys. He handed me 3 copies, and I held them in my palm like they were precious. Keys to my own home. Freedom in metal form. After he left, I walked through the house. Really walked through it, seeing it for the first time in months. The living room where Thomas and I had watched movies. The kitchen where we'd cooked together. The bedroom where we'd slept for 42 years, wrapped in each other's arms. This was my home. Mine. Not David's. And I was taking it back. I sat in the kitchen, waiting. My hands shook. I'd made coffee, poured it into Thomas's favorite mug. A chipped ceramic thing with a sailboat on it that he'd refused to replace. The normalcy of it felt surreal. Vonda and Sarah had offered to stay, but I'd said no. This was something I needed to do alone. They were waiting outside in Vonda's car just in case, but I needed David to see me standing on my own. He came home at 6:15. I heard his car pull into the driveway, heard his footsteps on the porch, then his key in the lock. The moment of confusion when it didn't turn. The second try. The third. The doorbell rang. I got up, walked to the door, and opened it just wide enough to see his face. "Mom, what's going on? My key doesn't work." "I had the locks changed, David." For a moment, he just stared. Then he laughed. This short, disbelieving sound that was more shock than humor. "You what?" "I had the locks changed, and I revoked the power of attorney. I closed the accounts you had access to and opened new ones. I've frozen the joint accounts. I've filed a report with Adult Protective Services and the police, and I want you to leave." I watched his face cycle through expressions. Confusion, disbelief, anger, fear, calculation. His mind working, trying to find the angle, the leverage, the way back in. "Mom, whatever someone's told you, whatever lies Vonda's been feeding you, this isn't about Vonda. This is about you stealing $42,000 from me. It's about you taking my pension every month and spending it on an apartment and furniture while you fed me store-brand crackers and made me feel like a burden. It's about you making me afraid in my own home." His face went pale. "I wasn't stealing. I was managing." "You were stealing, David. And it's a crime. Sarah Kim has all the documentation. Bank statements, receipts, the lease for your apartment. All of it." "Sarah Kim? My lawyer." "Your lawyer?" He said it like the words didn't make sense together. "Mom, you don't need a lawyer. We can work this out. Just let me in and we'll talk about this." No. It was the first time I'd said that word to him in months. Maybe years. No. Simple. Final. Non-negotiable. I also froze the accounts. All of them. This morning. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. "I imagine that's going to be a problem for you. The apartment rent is due next week, isn't it?" I watched him understand. Watched the color drain from his face as he realized that the money was gone, that the life he'd built with my savings, all of it was about to collapse like a house of cards. "You can't do this." His voice had gone very quiet. Dangerous. "I'm your son." "Yes," I said. "You are. And you stole from me. You humiliated me. You isolated me from my friends. You made me feel worthless. You made me afraid to speak, to ask questions. to exist in my own home. You made me small, David. You took my life and you twisted it into something ugly. And you did it while telling me you loved me. I was helping you. You were using me. You saw that I was grieving and vulnerable, and you decided that was an opportunity. You moved in not to take care of me, but to take from me. That's not true. Your things are in boxes on the porch. You have until Friday to arrange to pick up anything else. After that, I'm donating it. I started to close the door, and that's when he saw it. Through the gap, into the kitchen behind me. The refrigerator standing open. I'd left it that way on purpose, and I'd emptied it that morning. Every single thing he'd been counting on. Every meal he'd assumed would be there. Every bit of food he'd bought with my money. Gone. He pushed against the door. Not hard enough to hurt me, but hard enough that I stumbled back a step. He ran past me into the kitchen, and I let him. This was part of it. He needed to see. He needed to understand that it was over. He yanked open the fridge, the freezer, the cupboards, all empty, every single one. I'd taken everything to Vanda's house that morning. Every can, every box, every frozen dinner. Not because I needed it, but because he did. Because I wanted him to feel, just for a moment, what it was like to have nothing, to be dependent, to be powerless. The scream that came out of him was primal, not just anger, though there was that, but desperation. The sound of someone realizing they'd gambled everything and lost. He whirled on me, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not just rage, but fear. Real, desperate fear. He'd built his whole life on stealing from his mother, and now the foundation was gone. What did you do? His voice was shaking. What did you do? I took back what was mine. You can't. He was shaking now, hands clenched into fists. That's my food, my house, None of it was ever yours, David. Not one penny, not one meal, not 1 inch of this house. It was all mine, and you took it, and now I'm taking it back. Vanda appeared in the doorway then, with Sarah right behind her. I'd asked them to wait outside, to give me this moment alone, but they'd heard the scream and come running. Time to go, Vanda said. She was holding her phone up, recording. And we're documenting this, so whatever you're thinking about doing next, maybe reconsider. David looked at all of us. 3 women who'd had enough, who'd stopped being afraid, who'd stopped making ourselves small to accommodate his cruelty. Then he looked at me, really looked, and I saw the moment he recognized that he'd lost me. Not just the money or the house or the access, but me. Whatever relationship we'd had, whatever bond had once been real, he'd destroyed it completely, ground it into dust and scattered it, and there was no getting it back. I'm your son, he said again, but this time it sounded like a question, like he was asking if it still meant something, if blood was still a shield he could hide behind. Yes, I said quietly, and I loved you. God, David, I loved you so much. But love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. Love doesn't mean being complicit in your own abuse. Love doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. His face crumpled. For just a second, I saw the little boy he'd been, the child who'd skinned his knee and cried in my arms, the teenager who'd been so scared before his first day of high school. And I felt my heart crack open, because that little boy was still in there somewhere, buried under years of selfishness and entitlement and fear. But I couldn't save him. I'd learned that the hard way. You can't save someone who's drowning if they're going to pull you under with them. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I'm sorry that something in you broke. I'm sorry that you became this, but I can't let you take me down with you. I won't. He stood there for another moment, breathing hard, his hands shaking. Then something shifted in his face. The vulnerability closed off, replaced by cold calculation. You'll regret this, he said. When you're alone and sick and have nobody, you'll remember that you threw away your only son over money. It wasn't about money, David. It was about dignity. It was about being treated like a human being instead of an ATM machine. And I'd rather be alone than be afraid. He laughed. Bitter. Sharp. You're pathetic. An old woman who can't even take care of herself playing tough. Good luck managing without me. Good luck remembering your medications, paying your bills, figuring out the insurance forms. You needed me. No, I said simply. I needed help. I needed companionship. I needed family. But I never needed to be stolen from. I never needed to be diminished. And if the price of your help was my self-respect, Then it was too expensive. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw him realize that nothing he could say would change my mind. No threat, no guilt trip, no manipulation. The power he'd held over me was gone. He grabbed 2 of the boxes from the porch, ignoring the third one that held his winter clothes and old textbooks, and walked to his car. It was a Lexus, I noticed. A recent model. Another thing he'd bought with my money, probably. The car payment that had been essential, that he'd made me feel guilty for questioning. He threw the boxes in the trunk, slammed it shut, then turned back to look at me one more time. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but it's my mistake to make. That's what freedom is, David. The right to make your own choices, even the wrong ones." He got in the car and drove away. I watched his taillights disappear down the street, and I waited for the guilt, the sadness, the mother's instinct to forgive and forget and run after him. It didn't come. What came instead was air in my lungs, space in my chest, the feeling of being a person again, whole and solid and real. Behind me, Vonda touched my shoulder. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm free. That's something." Sarah stepped forward. "He might try to come back. He might try to manipulate you, threaten you, make promises. Don't engage. If he shows up, call the police. You have a restraining order hearing next week. I'll walk you through it." I nodded. My legs felt weak suddenly, like all the adrenaline was draining out at once. Vonda caught my elbow, steadying me. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you inside. I'll make tea." We went back into my house, and I locked the door behind us. The new lock clicked into place with a satisfying finality. Vonda put the kettle on while Sarah reviewed the paperwork I'd need for the next steps, and I sat at my kitchen table, in my home, and let myself just breathe. The legal process took 8 months. 8 months of court dates and paperwork and testimonies. David fought it at first. Hired a lawyer with money I suspected came from friends or loans, since I'd cut off his access to everything. He claimed he'd been acting in my best interest, that I was mentally unfit, that I was being manipulated by Vanda and Sarah, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements showing $42,000 spent in 6 months. The lease for the apartment in his name. Receipts for furniture, electronics, luxury items, none of which were in my home or for my benefit. Testimony from Vanda about my isolation. Medical records from Dr. Patterson confirming I was of sound mind and had no cognitive impairments. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many cases like mine. She listened to everything, reviewed every document, and then looked at David with something like disgust. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "you took advantage of your mother in her most vulnerable moment. You exploited her grief, her trust, and her love. You systematically stole from her while making her feel like a burden. This court finds you guilty of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." The judgment was $58,000, the $42,000 he'd stolen, plus the $18,000 Thomas had paid on David's behalf for the business loan, plus interest and legal fees. David was also ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me unless I explicitly consented to contact. He appealed. Of course he did. But the appeals court upheld the judgment, and 6 months after that, they started garnishing his wages. I got monthly checks, small ones, $100 or $200 at a time. At this rate, it would take years to recover what he'd taken, but I didn't need all of it back. Thomas's pension was mine again. The house was mine. The savings account, what was left of it, was mine. I had enough. I was okay. Sarah worked miracles beyond the courtroom too. She connected me with resources I didn't know existed. Support groups for elderly financial abuse survivors, counselors who specialized in family trauma, social workers who could help me rebuild the life David had dismantled. But more than anything, she gave me back my voice, my power, my right to say no, and have it mean something. "You saved yourself," she told me at our final meeting. "I just provided the legal framework. The courage was all you. I didn't feel courageous. I felt tired and sad and older than my 67 years, but I also felt alive in a way I hadn't in months. Present, real, mine. It was after David left, after the locks were changed, that I found the letter. I'd been going through my bedroom, reclaiming space that had started to feel like a tomb, organizing drawers, throwing away old receipts, making room for myself again. In the bottom of my underwear drawer, beneath the papers, Mr. Harrison had given me, I found an envelope I'd never seen before, my name in Thomas's handwriting. The ink was slightly faded, the paper creased like it had been handled many times before being tucked away. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, dated 3 years before Thomas's death, right around the time he'd put everything in my name. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry. Sorry I won't be there to grow old with you, to see you garden and read and live the quiet life we planned. Sorry I won't be there to hold your hand through the grief, to remind you every day that you're strong and capable and loved. But I'm not sorry for what I did with the finances. I need you to know that. I know our son. I love him. He's ours, how could I not? But I know him. I've watched him his whole life, waiting for him to grow up, to find purpose, to become the man I hoped he'd be. And Rachel, I don't think he's going to. I don't think he's capable of it. I've watched him fail at jobs, blame others for his mistakes, always have his hand out for one more loan, one more chance. I've watched him manipulate you, your soft heart, your mother's love, and I've covered for him more times than you know. The business loan? I never told you I was paying it off. The investment opportunity that lost $5,000? I told you it was a work bonus I'd squandered. I protected you from seeing the worst of him because I thought maybe, somehow, he'd still turn around. But 3 years ago, I saw something that made me realize he wouldn't. We were at that restaurant, remember? For your birthday. You'd gone to the restroom, and David and I were alone. He asked me about our finances, how much we'd saved, what the house was worth, what my pension would be. And when I asked why, he looked at me with these cold eyes and said, "Just planning ahead, Dad, for when you're gone. Not if, when." Like he was already counting down the days, like he'd already decided what he'd do with the inheritance. That's when I knew. Our son isn't waiting to become better. He's waiting for us to die so he can cash in. So I made sure he couldn't. I put everything in your name, legally, solely yours. And I talked to Bill Harrison, made sure it was airtight, made sure David couldn't contest it, couldn't manipulate it, couldn't take what wasn't his. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because I know grief makes us vulnerable. I know you'll want to believe the best in him. I know you'll want to trust him, to lean on him, to let him help. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe his father's death will change him. Maybe he'll step up and be the son you deserve. But if I'm right, if he tries to take advantage, if he tries to use your grief against you, if he tries to make you small, you need to know that you have the power to stop him. You always have. You're stronger than you know, Rachel. You always have been. You raised our son. You ran our home. You built our life while I was out building a career. You held us together through my father's death, through your mother's illness, through David's troubled teenage years, through everything. You're the strongest person I know, even though you don't see it. Don't let anyone, not even David, make you forget that. Don't let anyone tell you that loving them means disappearing. Don't let anyone convince you that you're too old, too weak, too confused to stand up for yourself. You're not. You never were. And if the time comes when you need to fight, even if it's against our son, I hope you'll remember that I'm still with you, in every strong decision you make, in every moment you choose yourself, in every time you say no and mean it. I'll be watching, wherever I am, proud of you, always proud of you. Take care of yourself, my love. Take care of the garden. Take care of that beautiful heart. And don't let anyone take from you what we spent a lifetime building together. All my love, forever. Thomas P.S. If David asks about finances, tell him to talk to Bill Harrison. Don't sign anything without having Bill review it first. Promise me, Rachel. Promise me you'll protect yourself. I read it 7 times that first day, tears streaming down my face. Thomas had known. He'd seen it coming. He'd tried to protect me, and I'd almost let it happen anyway. I'd almost let David do exactly what Thomas had feared. But Thomas had also believed I could stop it. He'd trusted that somewhere under the grief and loneliness, I'd find the strength to fight back. And I had. Late, but not too late. Wounded, but not broken. I framed the letter and hung it in my bedroom where I could see it every morning. A reminder, A promise. A love letter from beyond the grave that said, "You are strong enough. You always were." 6 months after David left, I decided to rent out his old room. Not because I needed the money, the pension and my careful budgeting were enough, but because the silence had stopped being peaceful and started being lonely. The house felt too big for one person. Too many rooms holding too many memories. Too many echoes of conversations that would never happen again. Thomas was gone. David was gone. And I was here, rattling around in a house built for a family that no longer existed. I put an ad online. Room for rent in quiet neighborhood. Older female homeowner. Prefer student or young professional. I got a dozen responses, but most of them felt wrong. Too loud. Too messy. Too much like they'd take over the way David had. Then Clara emailed. Her message was simple. "Hi, I'm a nursing student looking for a quiet place to study. I'm clean, respectful, and I love to cook. Would love to meet you if the room's still available." She showed up on a Saturday afternoon with her mother, which I appreciated. She was 23, with dark eyes that smiled before her mouth did, and thick black hair pulled back in a braid. She wore scrubs. She'd come straight from a shift at the hospital, and she looked tired, but warm. "Mrs. Morrison?" She held out her hand. "I'm Clara. This is my mom, Patricia." We shook hands and I invited them in for tea. We sat in the living room, the same room where David had made me feel small, and talked about rent, about house rules, about expectations. "I'm pretty quiet," Clara said. "I study a lot. I work weird hours at the hospital. I'll keep my space clean, and I'm happy to help with anything you need around the house." "I don't need help," I said, more sharply than I intended. "I'm not looking for a caretaker. I'm looking for a tenant." Clara nodded, not offended. "I understand. I just meant, like, if you need someone to grab something from a high shelf or help move furniture, normal roommate stuff, not taking over." I looked at her carefully. "Have you lived with someone before? Someone who tried to take over?" She glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "My ex-boyfriend," Clara said quietly. "He moved in and slowly made me feel like I couldn't do anything right, like I needed him for everything. It took me 2 years to leave." "How long ago?" "A year. I'm still working on trusting my judgment again." I understood that. God, did I understand that. "My son stole from me," I said. The words came out easier than I expected. "He moved in after my husband died and took everything. My money, my freedom, my dignity. It took me 6 months to get him out." Clara's eyes went soft. "I'm so sorry." "Me too." I poured more tea. "So here's what I need. I need someone who pays rent on time, who respects boundaries, who understands that this is my home and I'm in charge of it. Someone who won't try to take care of me or manage me or make me feel like I can't handle my own life." "That's fair," Clara said. "And here's what I need. A safe space. Somewhere I can study and sleep without drama. Someone who'll respect that I work crazy hours and sometimes need quiet and sometimes need to vent about a hard day. A roommate, not a landlord." We looked at each other. 2 women who'd been burned, trying to figure out if we could trust again. "What do you think?" I asked. Clara smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I think we might be good for each other." She moved in the following weekend. She took David's old room. We painted it first, a soft sage green that replaced the dark blue he'd chosen. Clara brought her own furniture, her nursing textbooks, photos of her family, a plant she named Gerald that she swore was impossible to kill. The house felt different with her there, lighter, like air was moving through rooms that had been holding their breath. She paid rent on the 1st of every month, cash, in an envelope with a smiley face drawn on it. She kept her space immaculate. She worked nights at the hospital 2 or 3 times a week, and she moved through the house like a ghost when she came home at dawn, trying not to disturb me. But it was the small things that changed everything. She'd leave notes on the kitchen counter. "Good morning. Made extra coffee." She'd text me if she'd be late. "Shift running over, don't wait up." She'd ask before borrowing anything. "Mind if I use some of your olive oil? I'll replace it." And every Sunday she made breakfast for both of us. The first time it happened, I came downstairs to find her in my kitchen, flipping pancakes. "I hope this is okay," she said, looking suddenly nervous. "My grandmother taught me. She said never eat alone if you don't have to. But if you'd rather I didn't—" "No," I said quickly. "No, this is lovely." So we ate together. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where David had made me sign away my power, where he'd made me feel like a burden, and we ate pancakes and talked about her patience, about the garden I wanted to plant, about nothing and everything. It became a ritual. Every Sunday, Clara cooked. She rotated through breakfast foods: pancakes, waffles, French toast, omelets. She was a surprisingly good cook for someone so young, and she explained that her grandmother had taught her everything before she passed away. "She raised me mostly," Clara said one Sunday. "My parents worked 2 jobs each, so Abuela was the one who taught me to cook, to clean, to take care of myself. She always said, 'Mija, nobody can take away what you know how to do.' She sounds wise." She was. Clara smiled, but her eyes were sad. She died when I was 19. It's why I became a nurse. I wanted to take care of people the way she took care of me. We talked about everything over those Sunday breakfasts. She told me about her patients: a little boy with leukemia who made her laugh, an elderly woman with dementia who thought Clara was her daughter and who Clara treated with such gentleness it made my heart ache. She told me about nursing school, about her dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, about how hard it was to see children suffer, but how rewarding it was to help them heal. I told her about Thomas, about our marriage, about the little rituals we'd had: morning coffee on the porch, Sunday crosswords, Thursday night movies. I told her about the garden we'd planned together, how Thomas had wanted roses and I'd wanted vegetables, and how we'd compromised with both. I didn't tell her everything about David at first, but eventually, over many Sundays, the story came out in pieces: the power of attorney, the isolation, the money, the fear, the scream at the empty fridge, the legal battle, the letter from Thomas. Clara listened without judgment, without pity, just listened, the way nurses do, with presence and attention and compassion that doesn't diminish you. "That must have been so hard," she said when I finished. "It was. It still is. He was my baby. I loved him before he was even born. I used to lie awake at night when I was pregnant, imagining who he'd be, what he'd look like, whether he'd be kind." I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug. I never imagined this. "My mom used to say that love without respect is just abuse with a prettier name," Clara said quietly. It took me a long time to understand what she meant, but she was right. Love should make you bigger, not smaller. "Yes," I said. "Exactly that." Clara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you protected yourself. I'm glad you got out." Me too. And I was. Sitting there in my kitchen with this young woman who'd become something more than a tenant, something like family, I felt grateful. Not for what happened. I'd never be grateful for that. But for surviving it. For finding my way back to myself. Once a month now, I go to a community center in Ballard and sit in a circle with 8 other women. We call ourselves the Survivors Group, though none of us particularly like the name. It feels both too dramatic and not dramatic enough for what we've been through. We're all over 50. We've all been exploited by family members, children, siblings, partners, in-laws. We've all had to make impossible choices between keeping family and keeping ourselves. And we've all chosen ourselves, one painful decision at a time. Vonda runs the group. She started it 5 years ago after helping 3 different women escape financial abuse by family members. She realized there were more of us than anyone talked about. More elderly people being stolen from, manipulated, controlled by the people who were supposed to love them. "It's the secret epidemic," Vonda said at my first meeting. "Nobody wants to talk about it. Because admitting your child or your spouse or your sibling is abusing you, it feels like failure. Like you raised them wrong, or loved them wrong, or weren't careful enough. But we're learning it's not about how we loved. It's about how they chose to exploit that love. The women in the group are remarkable. There's Patricia, 71, whose daughter had been taking her Social Security checks for 3 years. There's Margaret, 64, whose husband had taken out credit cards in her name and maxed them out. There's Diane, 58, whose brother had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage and nearly cost her the house she'd lived in for 30 years. 8 women, 8 stories, different details, same pattern. Family members exploiting trust, exploiting love, exploiting the vulnerability that comes with aging, or grief, or illness. Last month, a new woman came. Her name was Joyce, and she was 69, and shaking so hard she could barely hold her coffee cup. Her son-in-law had convinced her to add him to her bank account for emergencies, and then he'd drained $70,000. Her daughter, his wife, had defended him, said Joyce was confused, said Joyce was being unfair. "I don't know what to do," Joyce whispered. "If I report him, I'll lose my daughter. She's all I have left." I told her my story. All of it. The power of attorney, the isolation, the empty fridge, the scream, the legal battle, the restraining order, the Sunday breakfast with Clara. And I told her what I'd learned. "You won't lose your daughter," I said gently. "You've already lost her. You lost her the moment she chose to protect her husband instead of you. What you're doing now is deciding if you'll lose yourself too." Joyce cried. We all cried with her, because we'd all been there. We'd all had that moment of choosing between family and self, between keeping the peace and keeping our dignity. "It's not your fault," Vanda added, "and it's not too late. Legal help exists, protection exists, but you have to be willing to say out loud that someone you love is hurting you. You have to be willing to choose yourself." I gave Joyce Sarah Kim's phone number. "I don't know if she'll call. I don't know if she'll have the strength to do what I did, what we all did, but I planted a seed. I showed her it was possible. That's what we do in that circle every month. We show each other that survival is real, that dignity can be reclaimed, that even after betrayal, there's still life worth living. We're living proof that you can lose everything and still find your way back." David tried to contact me 3 times after the legal judgment. The first time was through email, a long, rambling message about how sorry he was, how hard things had been, how he'd made mistakes, but he'd learned from them. The email managed to be both an apology and an excuse, acknowledging wrongdoing while simultaneously justifying it. Classic David. I blocked his email address without responding. The second time was through a letter that arrived 4 months later. It was more polished, more carefully worded. He'd probably worked on it for days, maybe had someone help him with it. It talked about family, about forgiveness, about how much he'd grown. It asked for a chance to make things right. I almost threw it away unread, but Vanda convinced me I should at least see what it said. "Knowledge is power," she'd argued. "If he's escalating or threatening, you need to know. If he's genuinely trying to make amends, you need to know that too." So I read it, and it was empty. Beautiful words about growth and change and understanding, but no real accountability. No acknowledgement of the specifics of what he'd done. No plan for how he'd make actual restitution beyond the court-ordered payments. Just vague promises and emotional manipulation dressed up as personal growth. There was one line that made me angry. "I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did came from love." No, what he did came from selfishness, from entitlement, from the belief that his needs mattered more than my humanity. Love had nothing to do with it. I wrote back. One sentence. "I forgive you, but I don't trust you. Please don't contact me again. I don't know if that was the right thing to do. I don't know if forgiveness without reconciliation is real forgiveness. My therapist, yes, I see a therapist now, which Sarah had recommended, says forgiveness is for me, not for David. That it's about releasing the anger so it doesn't poison me, not about absolving him of responsibility. I'm still working on that. Some days I feel at peace with what happened. Some days I'm so angry I can barely breathe. Both are okay, my therapist says. Healing isn't linear. The third time David reached out was 6 months ago. He called from an unknown number, and I answered before I realized it was him. "Mom?" His voice was different, smaller. "Please don't hang up." I should have, but something in his tone stopped me. "What do you want, David?" I wanted you to know I'm in therapy. I've been going for 4 months now, working on everything." I didn't respond. "I know I hurt you," he continued. "I know what I did was wrong, and I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did." "That's good," I said carefully. "I hope you figure it out. Do you think—" He paused. "Do you think someday we could talk? Not now, I know, but someday." I thought about it, about the little boy he'd been, the man he'd become, the possibility, however slim, that people could change. "Maybe," I said. "But David, I need you to understand something. What you did broke us, fundamentally. And even if I forgive you, even if you become the best version of yourself, we'll never be what we were. We'll never be mother and son the way we were before. That's gone." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I know. If you're doing therapy for me, stop. Do it for yourself. Become someone you can be proud of. But don't expect that to fix us. Don't expect me to come running back because you've had some breakthrough. I've built a life without you, David. And it's a good life. I'm not giving that up. I understand. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know, but sorry doesn't undo what happened. It's just words until it's followed by sustained change. And even then, it might not be enough. We hung up after that. I sat there for a long time, holding the phone, feeling complicated. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not reconciliation, but maybe the smallest possibility of it someday, if he really did the work. Or maybe not. Maybe some things, once broken, stay broken. And that has to be okay too. The garden is blooming now. It's October again, a year since David moved in, 9 months since I got him out, and the world is transitioning into autumn. But my garden is still full of life. Thomas planted roses 30 years ago, and I'd let them go wild after he died. They'd become overgrown, tangled, more thorns than blooms. But Clara and I pruned them back this spring, cutting away the dead wood, shaping them back into something intentional. Now they're full of flowers, red and yellow, and this deep, dusty pink that looks like sunset. They smell like memory, like Thomas, like hope, like new beginnings. I also planted vegetables this year. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, herbs. Clara helped me build raised beds, and we worked in the dirt together on Sunday afternoons, our hands covered in soil, talking about everything and nothing. My abuela would have loved this, Clara said once, patting dirt around a basil plant. She always said working with your hands heals your heart. She was right. The garden has become my meditation. Every morning I take my coffee outside and sit among the plants. I check for pests. I deadhead flowers. I pull weeds. I talk to the tomatoes, which Clara says is scientifically proven to help them grow. Though I think she's just humoring me. Mrs. Chen's wind chimes still sing next door. The mailman still waves. Vonda still comes by every Wednesday for lunch. She brings Chinese food from the place downtown, and we eat it straight from the containers while watching game shows and complaining about how easy the questions are now. And Clara still makes Sunday pancakes. This morning, she made blueberry. We sat at the kitchen table, and she told me about a patient, a little girl who'd come in with a broken arm from falling off the monkey bars. She was so brave, Clara said. Didn't cry once during the cast. Just kept asking if she'd still be able to climb trees. Will she? In 6 weeks, yeah. I told her the cast would make her even stronger. She liked that. I smiled. You're going to be a wonderful nurse. I hope so. Clara poured more syrup on her pancakes. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. My graduation is in December. Would you come? My parents will be there, but I'd really like you to come too. Something warm bloomed in my chest. I'd be honored. Really? Because I know it's not. We're just roommates. Clara, I reached across the table. You're not just my roommate. You're my friend. Maybe even family. The chosen kind. Of course I'll be there. She smiled, and her eyes got a little watery. Thank you. That means a lot. We finished breakfast, and Clara left for her shift at the hospital. I washed the dishes. Another ritual, another ordinary moment that felt precious. And then I went outside to the garden. The roses were shedding petals, carpeting the ground in pink and red. The tomatoes were heavy on the vines. The herbs were bushy and fragrant. Everything was exactly as it should be. I'm 68 now. My hair has more gray than brown. I have arthritis in my hands that makes some mornings difficult. I take medication for blood pressure, for cholesterol, for the regular maintenance of an aging body. I have lines on my face that weren't there 2 years ago. Some from grief, some from stress, some from laughter. I'm not young, I'm not wealthy, I'm not remarkable in any obvious way, but I'm free, and I'm here, and I choose, every single day, to matter, to take up space, to refuse to be small. Sometimes I think about David. I wonder if he's really in therapy, really working on himself. I wonder if he thinks about me, if he regrets what he did. I wonder if he understands what he destroyed. Mostly, though, I think about Thomas, about the letter he left me, about the way he tried to protect me even after death, about the roses he planted that are still blooming, about the life we built together, the foundation that was strong enough to survive even David's attempts to tear it down. and I think about the future, about Clara's graduation, about the vegetables I'll plant next spring, about the next meeting of the survivors group, the next woman who'll walk in shaking and scared, who I'll get to tell, it gets better. You can survive this. You can reclaim yourself. I think about Sunday pancakes and Wednesday lunches with Vonda and the small, ordinary joys of a life lived on my own terms. A life where I pay my own bills, make my own decisions, answer to nobody but myself. It's not the life I expected. Thomas was supposed to be here. David was supposed to be different. Everything was supposed to go according to plan. But this life, this unexpected, hard-won, carefully rebuilt life, is mine. Fully, completely, undeniably mine. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. If this story found you in a moment when you needed it, I'm glad. If you know someone who's living smaller than they should, someone who's being told that love means silence and sacrifice and surrender, share this with them. Show them that there's another way. Show them that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. We share these stories because isolation thrives in darkness, because shame grows in silence, because the statistics are staggering. 1 in 10 elderly Americans experiences some form of elder abuse, and family members are the perpetrators in 90% of cases. But nobody talks about it, because admitting your child or spouse or sibling is abusing you feels like admitting you failed somehow. Like you didn't love them right, or raise them right, or see the warning signs in time. But abuse isn't about how we loved. It's about how they chose to exploit that love. And that's on them, not us. If you're in the middle of your own story right now, if you're afraid in your own home, if someone you love is making you small, if you're wondering whether what's happening to you counts as abuse, listen to me. It counts. Your experience matters. Your pain is real, and you deserve better. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. You deserve to control your own money. You deserve to make your own decisions, see your own friends, live your own life. You deserve respect, dignity, autonomy. And if someone is taking those things from you, even if they're family, even if they say they love you, even if they claim they're helping, it's abuse. And abuse isn't something you have to tolerate out of love or loyalty or fear of being alone. Being alone is better than being a prisoner. Being alone is better than being afraid. Being alone is better than slowly disappearing until there's nothing left of the person you used to be. I know that's easy for me to say now. 9 months out, sitting in my garden with my coffee and my peace. I know it's harder when you're in the middle of it, when you're exhausted and scared and convinced that nobody will believe you or help you or understand. But help exists. Resources exist. Legal protections exist. Adult Protective Services. Tentar novamente esta resposta foi pausada porque Claude atingiu seu limite máximo de caracteres para uma mensagem. Clique em continuar para que Claude prossiga. Continuar. Claude pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas. The National Center on Elder Abuse, the Elder Care Locator. They're all real, and they're all there for you. Lawyers like Sarah Kim exist. Friends like Vanda exist. People who will believe you, who will fight for you, who will help you find your way back to yourself. You just have to take the first step. Make the first phone call. Tell someone what's happening. Break the silence that's keeping you trapped. I know how hard that is. I know how the shame feels. Like admitting you're being abused by your own child somehow reflects badly on you as a parent. Like people will judge you, pity you, think less of you. But the truth is, anyone who judges you for being victimized doesn't understand abuse, doesn't understand manipulation, doesn't understand how someone can use your love, your grief, your vulnerability as a weapon against you. The people who matter, the people who've been there or who have genuine compassion, they won't judge you. They'll help you. They'll stand with you. They'll remind you that you're stronger than you think, because you are. You're stronger than you know. You've survived this long, haven't you? You've endured the manipulation, the isolation, the systematic dismantling of your autonomy. You've survived being made to feel worthless by someone who should have cherished you. That takes strength. Enormous, incredible strength. And if you've survived this far, you can take the next step. You can make that phone call. You can tell someone what's happening. You can start the process of taking your life back. It won't be easy. There will be legal battles and family drama, and people who don't understand why you can't just forgive and forget. There will be moments when you question yourself, when the guilt threatens to overwhelm you, when you wonder if you're doing the right thing. But you are. Choosing yourself is always the right thing. Protecting yourself from harm, even harm inflicted by family, is always the right thing. And anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't have your best interests at heart. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. We're here every day, sharing real experiences from real people facing impossible choices. Stories about the moments that define us, not because they break us, but because we decide against all odds not to stay broken. Some stories end in tragedy, some end in triumph, but the ones worth telling, the ones that matter most, are the ones that end in hope, in the stubborn, defiant choice to keep going, to keep becoming, to keep believing that dignity isn't something someone can take from you. It's something you reclaim, breath by breath, day by day, until you remember who you were before the world tried to make you small. And then you become even more than that, because surviving makes you stronger. Fighting back makes you braver. Reclaiming your life makes you unstoppable. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing these stories and carrying them forward. Because every time someone hears a story like mine and recognizes themselves in it, every time someone realizes they're not alone, every time someone finds the courage to take that first step toward freedom, that's when change happens. That's when the silence breaks. That's when survival becomes possible. And if you're reading this from the middle of your own nightmare, wondering if there's a way out, there is. I promise you there is. The fridge might be empty now. The accounts might be frozen. The door might be locked. But you're still here. You're still breathing. You're still reading these words, looking for hope. And that means your story isn't over yet. It means you still have fight left in you. You still have strength you haven't tapped into. You still have a future worth fighting for. So fight for it. Please, fight for yourself the way you would fight for anyone else you loved. Fight for the life you deserve, the one where you're safe and free and treated with dignity. Fight for the garden you'll plant, the friends you'll have over for lunch, the quiet Sunday mornings drinking coffee in peace. Fight for the person you'll become on the other side of this, the stronger, wiser, fiercer version of yourself, who survived the unsurvivable and came out the other side with grace. That person is waiting for you. I've met her. She's remarkable. She's resilient. She's sitting in her garden right now, surrounded by roses her husband planted and vegetables she grew herself, drinking coffee with a young woman who's become like family, living a life she chose and built and fiercely protects. She's me, and she can be you too. You just have to take the first step. And then the next one. And then the next. One day, maybe months or years from now, you'll be sitting in your own version of this moment, peaceful, free, yours. And you'll think back to this moment, the one where you were afraid and trapped, and wondering if escape was possible, and you'll be so proud of yourself for surviving it, so proud of yourself for fighting back, so proud of yourself for choosing you. I'm proud of you already, for reading this far, for looking for answers, for considering, even for a moment, that you deserve better. You do. You deserve so much better. And you can have it. I promise you can have it. The door is waiting. The lock can be changed. The accounts can be frozen. The power can shift back to where it belongs. In your hands, where it always should have been. All you have to do is decide you're worth saving. And you are. God, you are. You're worth every ounce of fight it takes to reclaim yourself. Every difficult conversation, every legal form, every moment of standing your ground when someone who claims to love you tells you you're wrong. You're worth it. All of it. Every single step toward freedom. Take the first one today. Make the call. Tell someone. Break the silence. Your future self, the one sitting in the garden, drinking coffee in peace, surrounded by people who actually love and respect you, is waiting. She's cheering you on. She's telling you that it's worth it, that you can do this, that the life on the other side of fear is better than anything you can imagine right now. Listen to her. She knows. She's been where you are, and she made it out. So can you. Starting now. Tentar novamente. Claude pode cometer erros, Confira sempre as respostas.